Welcome back, everybody, to the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod. I'm Brian Morgenstern here with the great Sam Lyman. Remember to follow us on X at MorgensternNJ, at Sam Lyman33. We are going to recap Trump's big speech to Congress and the bigger news, which was the ridiculous reaction to it from the opposition party. And we're going to talk about this battle for the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, which is heating up this week with a big event at the White House with President Trump. So, Sam, where should we kick it off today?
Let's kick it off with Dems in disarray. That's the headline from the speech that Trump gave to Congress this last week. So it was a pretty incredible speech. To give context for our listeners, this was the longest speech that a president has ever given to Congress. President Trump clocked in at 100 minutes, shattering the previous record made by Bill Clinton, where he gave a speech in the last year of his presidency that was about 89 minutes long. But President Trump gave a very long speech, an hour and 40 minutes, but this was no filibuster. It was a speech packed with substance, innovative new policy proposals, as well as very heartfelt human stories that you listen to some of these stories and think this could melt the heart of any partisan, or so you would think. However, even when President Trump announced peace in Ukraine with a de facto deal being hashed out there, even when he announced that a high school senior in the audience had been accepted to West Point, even when he announced that a child cancer survivor was going to be named an honorary Secret Service agent, the Dems never once stood up and applauded. It was just a cold, cold audience. And in place of applause, they went about with their theatrics. And let's look at one of the most memorable theatrics of the night, which was the signs that they held up. They held up signs. It gives, what was that?
The bingo paddles.
The bingo paddles, exactly. If you had no other context, you would think that this senior citizens in an old folks home playing bingo, because that's the age of the average Democratic member of Congress these days. And it's also the aesthetic that they're giving here. So it was a pretty eventful night. There was much more. In addition to the bingo paddles, we had outbursts from Congress as well. Most memorably, Al Green, the walking, talking meme, stood up and started protesting and shaking his fist and his cane at the sky. Let's watch a clip of that.
Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the sergeant-at-arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber. This is absurd.
There you go. So Trump laid the trap for Democrats. They walked right into it. You had Representative Al Green being escorted out by the sergeant at arms. I mean, this was a made-for-TV moment that Trump asked for. I almost think that he did this by design. It was really effective for him, and there's just so much to unpack here, Brian. And I know you wrote a Washington Times op-ed about this exact subject, biggest takeaways from the night, in which you point out that the Democrats are arguably their own worst enemies. Let's just dig into this. What was your biggest takeaways from this night of Dems having a temper tantrum over Donald Trump?
Well, every president generally gets a lot of applause, and usually the majority of viewers do approve of State of the Union speeches. The opposition party's in a tough spot, no matter who is the president, but you cannot make yourself the story in a negative way. Like, you should be able to clap for things that the president says that aren't really partisan, like celebrating a child who's battling cancer, or celebrating, a new cadet at West Point whose father and grandfather and great-grandfather served our country. These are stories that everybody should be applauding. I mean, the steelworker has 7 children, and he and his wife have fostered 40 children. These are quintessential Americans, like personifying the best part of our country and the indomitable American spirit. They couldn't even applaud for that stuff. Like, I mean, it's just totally crazy. They think we're in a different era than what we're actually in. I think they still think that because the mainstream media is in the tank against Trump, that they will look like heroes by just standing against him no matter what. And they still think, to a degree, certainly Al Green seems to think this, that we're still in like the civil rights era and that civil disobedience will make you a hero, but not like they're so out of touch. The bingo paddles, I think, tell the story almost better than Al Green purposefully getting himself thrown out of the chamber, although both were stupid. But the bingo paddles was a ready-made meme that can be used to mock them because you just clear out the content on the paddle and then you can make them say stupid stuff. And so that's how out of touch I think the Democratic leadership in Congress is right now. I want to have two functioning political parties in the U.S., so it doesn't give me a whole lot of joy to say this, but like they truly are in disarray right now. Trump owned the night, and they were flailing, when you can't share joy for obviously joyful things, when you're not clapping that the U.S. has brought a terrorist to justice who killed a bunch of Marines, what are we even doing? So I don't know. That's my takeaway is that the Dems somehow made themselves the story in a negative way when it was Trump's speech. I mean, that's never a win when that happens.
Never a win. Absolutely. And I think it shows their disconnect with new media that they didn't recognize that holding up bingo paddles was a meme in the waiting. They were essentially setting themselves up to be mocked online mercilessly. It's really disappointing for Democrats. And honestly, Brian, let's just be real. You and I, we lean right, but even people who don't lean right had pretty critical takes of the Democrats' behavior during this address to Congress. Let's give a listen to what David Axelrod, a former Obama advisor, had to say.
Would it have been healing stand for Mark Fogel? Might have been.
You know, you are absolutely right.
DJ
Scott.
Johnson.
What I will do what you will not. I will say, I thought that was just, I think there were times when they should have risen. I think what Al Green did was despicable.
There you go. I think what Al Green did was despicable. I think they should have risen. I mean, David Axelrod is 100% right here. What this behavior was, it was juvenile. It was theater kid energy. It was frankly immature, and it made Democrats look terrible before a national audience. And so there's a lot of Democrats right now that are actually doing some much needed self-reflection and trying to look at ways that the party can course correct to again appeal to mainstream Americans. And Brian, you and I have talked on this podcast before that in 2012, Republicans did an autopsy after Mitt Romney lost to see where they'd gone wrong and where they can improve. Interestingly, Democrats have also done their own autopsy to see where they've gone wrong in 2024 and how they can become relevant again. Let's give a quick look at some of the main takeaways from this autopsy that was performed. So, as it says here, some Democrats did an autopsy and they realized that one way they could appeal to more voters was by, quote, embracing patriotism, community, and traditional American imagery. And they could show up to tailgates, gun shows, and churches. So, Brian, this raises the question. If they follow this advice, is the future of the Democratic Party the Republican Party?
I think that's a great question. They really do have to get back. We've talked about before what they need to do, and it's listen to voters. It's go out into communities and ask people what matters to them, what's going to make their lives better, rather than just subscribing to this weird woke orthodoxy that they've been adopting that nobody really likes. The astroturf of provided by mainstream media isn't going to give them cover anymore. They actually have to be responsive to voters. So, like I said, I want to have two functioning parties competing to make our lives better, but we don't have that right now. We have Trump, and then we have Trump's flailing opposition. And if it continues this way, we're actually going to, there was a lot of concern about one party rule in America, like California, where it's a permanent Democrat voting bloc. If the Dems keep down their current track, we're going to have one party rule on the Republicans for a long time. I don't think that's actually going to happen. I think they will right the ship to some degree. But yeah, I mean, you need to show up and listen to voters. And that's what Trump did. He broadened his voting bloc by going to different constituencies and saying, well, what do you need? Like, what would you want me to do if I get elected? And then saying that, and to the extent it did, he would say, oh, that makes sense. Okay, I'll do that. And then people shut up for him who were not traditional Republicans. So to win elections, you have to, play the addition, not subtraction game. You have to convince voters to support you, rather than telling them, speaking down to them and telling them what you think they should feel or think. You should listen to them and reflect what your voters want. That's how a representative democracy is supposed to work. So interesting autopsy. I don't know how many Democrats today, and this is why I think an evolution is necessary. I don't know how many Democrats today would feel all that comfortable at a gun show or a church. So, maybe that'll help the party change for the better.
Yeah, perhaps. Like you said, though, Democrats need to stop talking down to voters and need to start talking to voters and hearing their concerns. I think one of the few Democrats who's actually doing that is John Fetterman, Senator John Fetterman. Very interesting guy. For those who don't know, he is the senator who always wears a hoodie and basketball shorts to major national events and even sometimes on the Senate floor. Quite the character. Say about him what you will, but one thing you can't deny is that he is rightly recognizing the wrongs of the Democratic Party in the areas where they're making mistakes. So let's take a look at one of his critiques of the night. He pointed out here with the Politico story, giving bingo, Democrats' silent protests against Trump falls flat. So John Fetterman, he screenshots that and he says it like it is. He says, a sad cavalcade of self-owns and unhinged petulance. It only makes Trump look more presidential and restrained. So he's not mincing words when it comes to criticizing his party and saying what they're doing wrong. And let's look at another take that he had recently. This is about immigration. He says, this is when we became the party for chaos, telling people to, sorry, I'm having trouble reading it, validate their eyes or experience, and we lose. So he is very clear-eyed in recognizing the wrongs that the Democratic Party has committed over the past several years. And then interestingly, Brian, you had Governor Newsom on Charlie Kirk, on a podcast with Charlie Kirk just recently. I believe this was just this last week, in which Governor Newsom admits that his son is a huge fan of Charlie Kirk. Not a good sign for the future of the Democratic Party when the Democratic governor of California's own son identifies more with Republican pundits. But in this podcast episode, it was fascinating because Charlie Kirk asks him, he says, will you admit that having men compete in women's sports is unfair to women? And he does admit that there is an element of unfairness to that. So it's quite an about face. That's a particular issue that I think the Democratic Party is slowly recognizing that they need to moderate on. But my question with all of this, Brian, is who comes next? Who do you see as the leader in waiting in the pipeline for the Democratic Party? Because as it stands right now, they appear to be completely leaderless. That's why you have chaotic displays of childish antics like we saw earlier this week during the president's address. I think it's why you see the inability to mount any kind of coherent messaging about what the Republican Party is doing wrong. I'm curious who you see as their young talent in waiting. Is there anybody at all who on the bench can come off and, be the Tom Brady for their party? Is there anybody, or do you think that there's still some time for them to develop that kind of talent within their own party?
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen, honestly. They are rudderless. They're leaderless at this time. The fact that they showed up to the State of the Union with bingo paddles and getting thrown out of the chamber on purpose shows that they're living in an era that has gone by. And, traditionally you would have some kind of leadership that would be guiding their opposition in a way that would be coherent, that would give the American people something to remember and disagree with when it came to the president's policy prescriptions. They're just flailing. There really isn't a leader right now. And so if their entire bench in Washington is ineffective, shall we say, then it may have to come from the states. Maybe it's going to be a governor like Newsom, or it could be Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, or maybe somebody else, but somebody with practical governing experience who has had to listen to constituents recently, who's not in just an uncompetitive, bright blue congressional seat, but somebody who's actually had to make tough decisions. And like I said, listen to constituents. I think it remains to be seen is my take on it. I don't think they have a leader today. and the field is kind of open for competition for that role. I don't know. What do you think? Do you have anyone in mind?
Yeah, I do think that John Fetterman is somewhat of a dark horse in the Democratic Party right now. I think he is recognizing what the Democratic Party is doing wrong. And I think that we're going to see a lot of disruption with AI. And AI could put a lot of people out of work, including white collar workers. And in that scenario, I do think that the Democratic Party could draw a contrast with Republicans because Republicans are becoming the party of the tech right, where they could levy critiques against the party, saying that the GOP is anti-worker in some sense. I think perhaps the Democratic Party finds its voice if that occurs with AI. And in that scenario, I think John Fetterman actually has positioned himself well as a man of the people, even though it's more or less a costume that he wears, wearing a hoodie and basketball shorts to all these events. Even so, he recognizes new media. He recognizes that wearing these schlubby clothes to very important and classy events is a great meme. And that's something that is replicable online. It's something that will go viral. Just a simple picture of him will give him the attention that he needs online. I think that's where Democrats are really struggling right now, is they have no idea how to navigate new media, as was evidenced by the bingo paddles that were going to be memed to mock them. And so John Fetterman, I think, is one of the few people in that party that recognizes where the party is going wrong and how to resonate across new media. And so I have my eyes on him as a potential competitor, but I also agree with you. There doesn't seem to be anyone that stands out in a Obama at the 2004 DNC kind of way, but never say never. Things can definitely change, but we've focused a lot on where Dems went wrong in this State of the Union speech. Let's focus on where Trump and Republicans went right, because it really was a positive night for the GOP. You know, progressives, they hated this speech. However, the American people loved this speech. And there's CBS polling data to back that up. Let's take a quick look at how Americans felt about this speech. So 76% of the public that viewed Trump's address approved of it. They liked it. They thought it was good. And then the amount of time that they said that Trump spent on issues that they cared about was 63%, said they cared about. He spent a lot of time on those issues. And then let's go to the next one. How did the speech make you feel? 68% said it made them feel hopeful, 54% proud. And the minority said it made them feel worried or angry. Let's go to the next one as well. Does Trump have a clear plan for inflation? People are confident that he does. 68% say yes. And then let's go to the final one right here. Trump described crime as a problem. 68% said that he got that right. Having the congressman removed from chamber for interrupting Trump, 3/4 of the American people approved of that. So the American people liked what they saw. They liked what they heard in Trump's speech. And frankly, so did we. Brian, I'm curious, focusing on the positive of this night, what were your biggest takeaways and what was your favorite part of the speech itself?
My biggest takeaways were that Trump has settled, he's being framed as divisive and, whatever threat to democracy, whatever screeching has been lobbed at him for years. And he's just flying right in the face of that. He's picking these 80-20 issues, which has kind of been a talking point, I think, inspired by some of Scott Jennings' appearances on CNN. He really has picked like these 80-20 issues and just hammered those. And that's the way you build, I think, a durable coalition. And it's about securing the border. It's about being tough on crime. It's about having economic prosperity through tax cuts, deregulation, improved trade deals. It's about pride in our country and that this idea that American citizenship should mean something. These are all ideas that that most people agree with, and that's where he's sticking. Government waste, cutting government waste, is one of the most popular ideas. It's sort of been a punchline, waste, fraud, and abuse, for decades, and numerous administrations, Republican and Democrat alike, have always threatened to tackle waste, fraud, and abuse. Trump is actually doing it, and the public loves it. That was my takeaway: is that Trump has picked these issues that are wildly popular, but that nobody's actually done anything about. And he's focusing on them. And that is a recipe for a pretty popular president. And I think that's why his speech was so well received. My favorite moment of this, there are a bunch of really good ones, I thought. I mean, it was really heartfelt with DJ becoming the Secret Service agent. It was really heartfelt, naming the wildlife refuge after Jocelyn. It was really meaningful when the new cadet was admitted to West Point. But I did pick a clip because I always like to focus on Trump's stand-up comedian talent. And that is one of my favorite parts of Trump. So I picked what I think was a couple of the funniest lines of the speech. So Dylan, I think I sent you that link with a quick clip of some of the funniest lines from Trump.
She missed that part. That's funny.
Nobody's ever heard of. His delivery's so good. And he even got, pretty raucous, boisterous laughs. Like that was a good response from a comedy club to those lines. So that's what I wanted to highlight. There are, the other ones I mentioned were incredibly poignant moments, but everybody already knows about those and highlighted those. So I wanted to highlight the jokes because I thought they were awesome.
Yeah, well, Brian, you and I have both been speechwriters at different parts of our career. And the way I got my foot in the door with speechwriting was actually by writing jokes first. It's such an important part of a speech. And I think it's so often missing from dressed up events like a State of the Union address or an inauguration address. So Trump, he understands how critical humor is as part of the art of rhetoric. And I think he wields that weapon better than any politician I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Yeah, for sure. And his improv skills are great. I mean, a lot of his laugh lines are not even in the written speeches. They're just in the way he reacts to it. He feeds off the audience, and he'll react to something that he says, or he'll react to the reaction from the audience to something he said. And those moments are often create the best comedy because they're genuine. He's surprised sort of along with his audience, and that is what really can create a strong bond between the speaker and the crowd. So I love those moments. Those are great.
I do too. I also think about Barack Obama. Everyone holds up Barack Obama as one of the greatest orators of our generation, but I can't name a single line. I can't recite a single line from a Barack Obama speech. And if you were to ask the average American, they can't either, which is interesting because
if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. The lie of the century is the one that I can remember.
There we go. So there is that one. But as far as poetic statements go or memorable, heartfelt, moving lines, I can't think of one. I know The Audacity of Hope, the title of his book, but it's not really a line from a speech, right? Whereas think of how many Trumpisms people can recite, whether it be many people are saying or many such cases, or he's just so funny and he has so many memorable lines. And yeah, maybe it's not as poetic and dressed up as a Barack Obama speech, but it sticks with people. And I would argue that Donald Trump is actually the greatest orator of our generation. I'm not even joking. He knows how to speak for the internet age. He understands memes. He understands how to get attention. And like you said, how to connect with an audience in a way that I haven't seen any other politician do over the past couple decades. So those were great clips. My personal favorite moment of the night is when Donald Trump goes EAC mode. EAC stands for effective accelerationism. This is the EAC presidency. Donald Trump brings so much vision, so much optimism, and so much hope with his policies. He shoots not just for the sky, not just for the moon, but for Mars. Let's play this clip and give that a listen.
We are going to conquer the vast frontiers of science, and we are going to lead humanity into space and plant the American flag on the planet Mars and even far beyond.
Heck yeah. Like, I just listen to that and it makes me so proud to be an American. This idea that it's America's purpose to lead humanity to the stars. I really do believe that. And it's that kind of hopeful messaging that I think has been missing from our politics for so long. We went to the moon in 1969, but we really haven't been back in any meaningful way. And so the idea that we're not only going to return to the moon, but return to Mars, I think distills the boldness of his presidency and the unapologetic American patriotism that has drawn so many voters towards this movement. So that was a really positive, memorable moment of the night for me, in addition to those comedic lines as well. So, Brian, we've unpacked a lot of that speech. Let's pivot now to Bitcoin. There is a battle brewing over the Bitcoin reserve as we speak. Recently, Donald Trump came out and he announced that there would be crypto involved in some kind of reserve as well. Let's take a look at what he posted on Truth Social on Sunday. It's always good when you get a chaotic social post on a Sunday because it wakes everybody up. So in this particular post, President Trump talks about a U.S. crypto reserve, and that crypto reserve will include cryptocurrencies beyond Bitcoin. It will include XRP, Solana, and ADA, also known as Cardano. And so he says it's part of making America great again. This really has stirred a lot of controversy within the cryptocurrency industry because we thought it was going to be a Bitcoin only reserve, but then lo and behold, he brings in XRP, which is interesting and I think speaks to the power of the Ripple lobby. Let's unpack this, Brian, because you had a fire thread yesterday about Ripple, XRP, everything that scam token stands for. And I think it'd be great if we could just go through your thread and talk about why this might not be the best idea for the United States of America.
Sure, yeah. And I have often said one of the greatest aspects of Trump is that he listens to everybody. No tax on tips came from a waitress in Las Vegas. He will listen to ideas from everybody. One of the most dangerous aspects is that he will listen to absolutely everybody. And he doesn't always kick the tires before announcing an idea. I suspect he spoke with somebody from Ripple and they're like, you should do this. And he was like, oh, that sounds good. The problem is that they don't have his interests in mind. When we've helped to educate him on Bitcoin and some of the issues facing our industry, we try to do it in a way where we explain how he could help us and he will get support. If he helps us, there'll be voters who will really care about it and come out for him, if he does these things. So it's really been kind of a two-way street where we're looking out for him in asking how he might look out for us. I think the interactions he's had with Ripple has been a one-way street where they're just trying to convince him to do things that will help themselves, but will actually hurt him politically. So Dylan, you can throw up my thread, but I'll explain why he really should stop listening to them. One, their kind of theory of the case is that their platform is going to be a CBDC platform. They want to help central banks, monetary authorities, commercial banks, governments to implement CBDCs, which is something that President Trump has basically banned through his executive order. He campaigned on never allowing a CBDC. And yet here's, Ripple's business case is like, well, we're going to have governments and central banks implement CBDC. So there's already a big conflict there. In the next one, Dylan, they're a partner of the World Economic Forum, and WEF, I don't know how much they paid WEF. They tend to just pay for stuff with money that they stole from their customers. WEF has said that XRP is the most relevant asset in the CBDC space. So further kind of solidifying what we're talking about, they sort of aspire to be an instrument of centralized control, which is the opposite of what Trump wants and what Bitcoiners want. So you can continue down the thread, Dylan. Yeah, they supported Democrats in the past, including $12 million to Kamala Harris. They supported Greenpeace and basically declared war on Bitcoin. That's another point I want to make clear. We didn't start a fight with them. They just started attacking our company. They started attacking Bitcoin in general. They have this delusional idea that XRP is going to be a competitor to Bitcoin. I'll get more into that in a second, but we can continue down through the thread here. So they funded Greenpeace to attack Bitcoin and Bitcoin companies. Greenpeace is a opponent of Donald Trump. They oppose his energy dominance agenda. So this is a company that was funding his opposition. They were not helping him. Their coin, if you want to call it that, is really, they could change the supply cap. It is not a security. It's not a commodity. It's basically a baseball card, but that wants to be a CBDC. You can continue down. And it is totally unreliable. It crashed in February. They don't know where over 30,000 blocks of transactions are. This is not a reliable instrument. And that is why it makes no sense to have XRP in a national strategic reserve. It does make sense to have Bitcoin because it is an asset without an issuer. It is truly decentralized. It has an absolute supply cap. There will never be more than 21 million, which is why there is a competition to acquire it. That is what makes it strategic. I was thinking about how to describe the situation. Basically, like I said, Ripple has declared war on Bitcoiners. Bitcoiners are merely stating the facts and defending themselves. This is counterpunching. This is not picking a fight with them. They picked the fight with us. But I originally thought that Ripple and XRP were like, to the extent they view this as a competition between Bitcoin and XRP. At first, I thought that's like Mets fans claiming that they have a rivalry with the Yankees.
Yeah.
It is not a rivalry. That is a one-way street. The Yankees fans are like, I don't think about you at all.
Yep.
Like that is not a rivalry with 27 world championships. That's not the best analogy, though. I think that XRP is a competitor to Bitcoin in the way that nails are competitors to hammers, because the good qualities of Bitcoin is decentralization, its supply cap, it's an asset without an issuer, its freedom enhancing qualities are what will make it appreciate over time and what will drive altcoins like XRP down over time. So Bitcoin is just going to continue to grow while XRP continues to be unreliable, and it will shrink towards zero, its value towards zero. The XRP army, they sure do have a lot of bots on Twitter who just like to lob personal insults, but they certainly don't have the facts on their side. And so I've been very heartened to see a number of leaders in the space come out and say, look, we love altcoins. People should be able to do what they want. But in terms of a strategic asset for our country, that's Bitcoin. And that is the correct take. And that has included the three leading exchanges that facilitate trading of altcoins. CEO of Coinbase, CEO of Gemini, CEO of Kraken, have all basically taken the position people should have the freedom to do what they want. But if you are deciding what is a strategic asset for the United States, it's Bitcoin. It's not these other things. That doesn't mean people shouldn't be able to use them and trade them and develop new technologies. But if you're asking what is the strategic asset, it's Bitcoin, because there is basically a space race for a scarce amount of it. And that is a pretty reasonable position to take. I think the only ones who haven't gotten that memo are the Ripple bots. But I think Trump hopefully has or will get that memo very soon, and we'll have a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Yeah, let's hope so. And we'll probably find out tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday, and it's the crypto summit, the first White House crypto summit to ever be held. It will be hosted by David Sachs and Bo Hines, who lead up the AI and crypto efforts at the White House. It could be really interesting to see what happens. And I think a lot of criticism has been levied at the White House in lieu of this idea of a crypto reserve. It gives fodder to the anti-crypto army, people like Elizabeth Warren, who are saying that a crypto reserve would just be a bailout for crypto bros. It's a sharp criticism. I don't think that's how it's going to pan out at all, though. I think David Sachs made clear that this won't be something that will require more tax dollars to fund. Let's take a look at his tweet about what the crypto reserve will entail. After being accused of this being a tax bailout for crypto holders, David Sachs says, nobody announced a tax or a spending program. Maybe you should wait to find out what's actually being proposed. So David Sachs laying down the law to Joe Lonsdale there. Brian, I'm curious what you think will happen tomorrow. Will there be some kind of distinction between a Bitcoin reserve and a crypto reserve in terms of how those two things are seated? Or do you think that the president will simply say that all crypto, both Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies that the country currently holds, will just hold on our balance sheet for an extended period of time? Or do you think there will be some sort of active effort to acquire more Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies on part of the US government?
The short answer is I don't know. And I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. And I wonder if they've made a decision. It sounds like there is something that they're going to announce. However, in my conversations around the Hill and the administration, I think that there is a lot of uncertainty in terms of how to fund a Bitcoin reserve. Are they just going to use what they have? Are they going to revalue the gold and use some portion of that to purchase Bitcoin? Are they going to implement some other program? Are they going to use the exchange stabilization fund and treat Bitcoin like similar to a foreign currency? I don't know. And I would be very surprised if they actually have a final answer to these questions tomorrow. So, but I'll be watching intently and excited to see what happens. Some of the voices that we know will be in the room are terrific. I mean, the Winklevoss twins are great. Michael Saylor is great. Our friend David Bailey at Bitcoin Magazine is great. So there will be some really, really good people there, in addition to some of the leading CEOs of exchanges and companies that facilitate consumer use of various crypto assets. So, it could be a pretty wide-ranging discussion. And I'm skeptical that there's going to be a lot of super firms. It would be nice if there are, but it just feels a little early for that. I don't know. That's my, just looking into my crystal ball, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think you're right that after the president's Truth Social post caused so much controversy that maybe one of the reasons we haven't heard much from the White House about who will be there or what will be happen or what will be announced is that it might be being hashed out as we speak right now, partly in reaction to the controversy that was caused by the Truth Social post. I guess we'll just wait and see, though. Fingers crossed for a robust Bitcoin reserve. I think that would be something that's good long-term for the country, long-term for the world as well. David Zell over at BPI, the Bitcoin Policy Institute, he had a really good post this morning where he makes very clear that Bitcoin doesn't need a reserve. America needs Bitcoin. And I think that's very true. In the worst case scenario where no Bitcoin reserve happens, Bitcoin's going to be totally fine. It's the hardest money in the world, and it's a deflationary asset, the most deflationary asset in the world, arguably. And for those simple reasons, it will continue to grow. The network will continue to expand, and it appears that the price will continue to increase over time, whether we have a Bitcoin reserve or not. And recognizing that that is the case, I hope American policymakers can recognize just how vital it is that we make some kind of Bitcoin reserve. And before we get there, though, there is a lot of noise to move through. And I think some of that noise comes again from Ripple. Ripple are stocked with billions of dollars, which again comes from them dumping tokens on retail investors. But with those billions of dollars, they stand up what seems like a new lobbying group every couple months. And their most recent installment is an organization called the National Cryptocurrency Association. And they're now plastering giant billboards all across DC and other places that have eerie vibes to SBF and the early ads from FTX. So this is just a photo where they're saying crypto doesn't have a type. And it's very similar to the bizarre FTX ads that put Sam Bankman-Fried up close and made him the face of crypto. And I think that is the very problem with tokens like XRP. You think XRP, and if you're in the industry, immediately you think of Brad Garlinghouse. You think of the CEOs. You think of the humans behind these tokens. That's the problem with crypto and not Bitcoin. Bitcoin has no CEO. Nobody controls it. There's no single figure who determines how much the supply is, who determines what the price is going to be, who determines the monetary policy. It is the most decentralized, anonymous, and democratic currency to ever exist. And that stands in stark contrast to pretty much every cryptocurrency out there, especially XRP. So when I see things like the National Cryptocurrency Association, my first thought is this is going to end in tears. If we have not learned as an industry from the lessons of the past, it's that decentralization, whether people care about it or not, is absolutely critical to this industry. And when you have CEOs abusing retail investors and essentially putting themselves as the heroes of a crypto protocol that never ends well for anybody. And so I hope the industry can learn from the lessons of the past and recognize that Bitcoin is the single cryptocurrency that has proven itself to withstand the most intense volatility imaginable. It's the most Lindy crypto asset that exists, and it's the only crypto asset that has the global adoption and all the properties of physical gold. And for those reasons alone, it should be the only asset in a reserve, in my opinion. And we'll see what the White House comes out with tomorrow. Of course, we're open-minded to all things, and I'm glad, like you said, Brian, that President Trump does listen to feedback. And so fingers crossed on this one. So the battle for the Bitcoin reserve, that's still to be resolved. We'll see what takes place this weekend. But we've covered a lot of territory today. Before we end, we, of course, always have our grab bag section. Brian, do you have any grab bag items for this week?
Yeah, a positive tweet from David Sachs, who I think has heard, he's been hearing what some of our industry leaders have been saying. So first we can throw that one up, I think, if you have it there, Dylan. Yeah, here's the problem. This is what Germany did with what was it, Mt. Gox or something, where they sold all their Bitcoin. And then, of course, Bitcoin continues to appreciate over time. So David Sachs, I think, is hearing from really smart people. This is a very bullish sign that they're going to reach the correct policy prescriptions at the end of the process. There's a number of ways to succeed here, but this to me shows that he's been listening, and this is a really great sign. I also do want to give a shout out. That tweet that you mentioned from our friend David Zell was absolutely correct. Bitcoin doesn't need a strategic reserve. The United States needs a strategic reserve. Bitcoin's going to be fine regardless, but this is going to be a race to acquire this scarce decentralized asset. And there's going to be a first mover advantage to whoever does it. So it should be the United States. So I think that's the right way to think about this. So yeah, I guess my grab bag just kind of continued our existing conversation, but that's what's been on my mind since it's been such a hot topic of conversation.
Yeah, that's what's been on my mind ever since President Trump's Truth Social post. So he really knows how to set the scene and build suspense for an event like the White House Crypto Summit tomorrow. I truly will be on the edge of my seat waiting to see what happens there. So, Brian, we covered a lot today. Anything else we should cover before we close things out?
I think we've, I agree. We covered a lot. I think that's about it. Just remember to follow us on X at MorganSternNJ, at SamLyman33. Like and subscribe. Send us your feedback, except if you're an XRP bot. Those are pretty annoying. And we will see you next time here on the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod.